Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most incredible political documents ever written, the Constitution of India. And I want you to forget the idea of a dry, simple rulebook. Think of this more as a masterclass in how to manage the immense, often contradictory pressures of building a nation.
You know, the entire project of writing a constitution really boils down to this one kind of dangerous question. How do you create a government that's powerful enough to actually do good things without accidentally creating a monster that could one day turn on its own people?
And the absolute genius of India's constitution is that it never even pretends to have the final, perfect answer. Instead, it creates a framework for a continuous, dynamic balancing act. It's designed to manage these huge tensions that exist in a nation as vast as India. So let's dig into the first big one.
Okay, here's the first great tension. How on earth do you unite a subcontinent with just an unbelievable amount of diversity, all its languages, its religions, its cultures, into one single cohesive nation? I mean, just think about it. This was the colossal task facing the framers. They knew that if they tried to force everyone into the same mold, the whole thing would just shatter. The solution had to be about building unity through diversity, not by erasing it.
So their answer was this unique take on federalism. What's really telling is that the Constitution doesn't even use the word federation. Instead, it calls India a union of states. Now, that's not just semantics. It signals a system with a really strong center to prevent the country from breaking apart, but one that also gives powerful states the room to nurture their own unique identities.
And what's so fascinating here is that India's framers looked at the American model and deliberately rejected it. You see, in the U.S. Senate, a tiny state gets the exact same 2 seats as a massive one. India chose a totally different path. Representation in its upper house is based on population. It was a really practical compromise, making sure the voices of the most populous states were actually heard in a country of such incredible scale.
This exact same logic led to another tool for handling diversity. Jaipal Singh, who was speaking for India's tribal communities, made this really crucial distinction. He argued for reserved seats inside a common political system. He specifically rejected the idea of separate electorates, which had been used by the British to divide communities. The whole point wasn't to build separate political worlds. It was to guarantee a voice at the main table. It was another delicate balance, inclusion but without separation.
All right, so that leads us right into the next major balancing act, a real classic democratic dilemma. How do you protect individual rights while still giving the government the power it means to act for the good of everyone?
The Constitution sets up this really interesting creative tension between 2 key chapters. On one side, you've got the fundamental rights, things like freedom of speech or religion, and these are legally enforceable. You can go to court over them. They're a hard limit on what the government can do. But then, on the other side, you have the directive principles of state policy. These are goals, like ensuring equal pay or protecting the environment. Now, you can't sue the government for not achieving them, but they act as a kind of moral compass, pushing the government towards social and economic justice.
And believe me, this was not just some abstract academic debate. It played out, for real, in a decades-long tug-of-war over the right to property. As Parliament tried to push through land reforms, it kept clashing with the courts over this fundamental right. This timeline just shows you how that balance eventually shifted, proving that the Constitution isn't static. It's a living document where big societal needs can actually reshape individual rights over time.
Okay, so a constitution needs to be a rock, right? It's got to be stable and enduring. But it can't be a fossil, totally frozen in time and unable to adapt to new challenges. So how did India's framers manage to build a document that was both a fortress and, well, a living thing?
They came up with this pretty ingenious tiered system for making changes. Some parts of the Constitution can be amended with just a simple majority in Parliament, kind of like any other law. This makes it flexible for the less critical stuff. But for most of the Constitution, you need a special majority, which is a 2/3 vote. And then, for the really core stuff, anything that messes with the power balance between the central government and the states, you need that special majority, plus you have to get at least half of the state legislatures to agree. It's an incredible design that makes it both flexible and rigid, right where it needs to be.
And the Constitution has definitely proven it can adapt. I mean, in its first 69 years alone, it was amended over 100 times. But check this out.
The real story here is when those changes happened. Look at the spikes in the 1970s, and then again after 2000. These bursts of activity line up with major political shifts and upheavals. It just goes to show the Constitution isn't some dusty rulebook on a shelf. It's a dynamic arena for political struggle.
So, this begs a huge question. What's to stop a government with a massive majority from just amending the most important principles right out of the Constitution? Well, the answer came from the Supreme Court in 1973 with something called the Basic Structure Doctrine. It's this brilliant judicial innovation that basically says Parliament can change anything in the Constitution, but it can't change the Constitution's fundamental identity. Things like democracy, federalism, the rule of law, they're part of its unchangeable core. It's the ultimate constitutional safety net.
And this all leads us to the final and I think most important takeaway. The real genius of the Indian Constitution isn't that it magically has all the answers.
You see, visionaries like Sardar Patel, they understood that the goal wasn't to snap your fingers and erase all differences overnight. The real purpose of the Constitution was to create a shared framework, a set of rules for the road, if you will, that would allow all of India's diverse communities to argue, to debate, and to ultimately figure out how to evolve into a single, united community through a messy but democratic process.
And that right there is the living legacy of India's Constitution. It doesn't try to silence debate. It actually invites it. It provides the arena and the rulebook for this ongoing national conversation about who we are and who we want to be. It's a balancing act that started over 70 years ago and one that continues to shape the destiny of more than 1 billion people to this day.